Welcome to the Sencast. My name is Dale Pickles. I'm the Managing Director of B Squared and the host of the Sencast, the podcast for special educational needs and disability. Each week we'll be talking about a different topic within the world of special educational needs to improve our knowledge, to provide support to professionals working in schools and to empower parents. In a world there is less guidance, less money, more demand, continual changes, teachers, Sencos, leaders and reality all staff need a way to keep up that fits in their lives. And the Sencast is obviously the answer. In this episode, we're discussing life's ups and downs of having or not having a special educational needs assessment. This week, my guest is the one, the only, Dr. Susie Nyman. Susie is a regular on the podcast and is the curriculum manager at the Sixth Form College in Farnborough. Susie is a master of multi-sensory teaching and spends lots of time sharing her knowledge. The Sencast is created and produced by us here at B Squared, as well as our assessment products and our evidence and parental engagement platform. We also run online training sessions that we call Sencast sessions. If you go on the Sencast website, you'll see a range of over 150 training sessions. These sessions often feature our amazing podcast guests, but are more formal with slides that you can also download. We run 9 live sessions each year, which you can join and be part of that Q&A at the end. Or you can watch them whenever it suits you. We also run 2 free SEND briefings each year, so you can keep up to date with the changes in the world of SEND. You can find out more about our training sessions and our free SEND briefings by going to the Sencast website. Now, let's get on with the podcast. On this week's show, we're discussing life's ups and downs of having or not having a special educational needs assessment. My guest is Dr. Susie Nyman, although I found out that's not her real surname, but that's a different thing. The curriculum manager at the Sixth Form College, Farnborough. She is passionate about discovering how children learn and supporting ways that enable them to succeed. She has provided training to PGCE students at King's University and a number of local schools and colleges all around teaching strategies. She also delivers talks on multi-sensory teaching techniques around the world. Welcome back, Susie.
Thank you very much, Dale. We still need to finish up a few of these lovely Percy pigs. We've normally eaten a few more by now, to be honest.
Well, no, I have. You haven't.
Oh,
You're on track. I'm trying to be good and have less.
oh, okay.
Over the last few years, we have seen a huge increase in the request for diagnosis for autism, dyslexia, and other neurodiverse conditions. And parents may feel that having a diagnosis is a golden ticket to access support for their child, and that's a destination. But for their child, there is a lot more going on, and getting a diagnosis is not the end. It is part of a journey that will go on for years as they relearn who they are.
Yes, and that'll go on for the rest of the life. And if you get a really good assessment, it can set you up for life all the way through school, going through college and university, having all your special extra time, access arrangements. Also, you may require some assistive technology that would be part of that package. It's a good thing to do, but some people feel it's not the right thing to do. And so they don't have the assessment for one reason or the other.
And it's really interesting when you see parents not wanting to get their child assessed, your immediate thing of why wouldn't you? But generally it's probably a more complicated reasons around why that isn't happening. And it's probably there's a lot of emotions from everyone involved on why that is or isn't happening.
I think so. It's a roller coaster when you do find out. And some parents don't want that label for their child.
Yeah.
The stigma that goes with that label.
That's the thing. And sometimes it's built on their experience, their past experiences of those labels and what that meant, and thinking that my child won't be able to get a job, they won't be able to do this, they won't be able to do that. And it's not always the case. I'm not saying it's not the case. I'm saying it's not always the case.
And if you find your tribe, celebrate the way you are. If you're not neurodiverse, be yourself.
And that's the thing
is important.
And I can't. There's some quote about if you're a stripy horse, everyone just looks at you as a weird horse. You then find out you're actually a zebra. And you look over there and going, wow, I fit in over there. That's very similar, a horse and a zebra, but very big differences. And that zebra will always fit. And that sort of thing is, I sit there and going, look, if that's who you are, then that's who you should, that's who you are, that's who you should be. And that support and everything should be there to do it. Yeah. But in some situations, there are reasons that doesn't happen.
Find your tribe.
Find your tribe. Yeah. Be a zebra.
Yeah, why not? And these people, you know, they're neurodiverse. And neurodiversity refers to a variation in the human brain regarding sociability, learning, attention, mood, and other mental functions in a non-pathological sense. That was coined by Judy Singer in 1998, who was an Australian sociologist. And it's just becoming everyday language now, isn't it? Neurodiversity. It is. So neurodiversity is a concept where neurological differences are to be recognised and respected as any other human variation. And these can include those labelled with dyspraxia, dyslexia, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder or ADHD, dyscalculia, autistic spectrum, Tourette syndrome, and others. So I think schools and workplaces are finding out more about neurodiversity and how people that are neurodiverse are really useful in the workplace.
Problem is, at the moment, a lot of the wider knowledge is around all the can'ts, not the cans. It's the can'ts. And that's generally where people focus is they can't do this, they can't access this, they're unable to. And it makes that person feel like they can't. Mm-hmm. They can, just maybe in a different way.
Yeah, and finding that way that works for them is useful. So SpLD and neurodiversity, SpLD are specific learning difficulties as opposed to global learning difficulties. So they can affect one or more specific areas of learning rather than all the areas. The SpLD affects the way information is processed and learned, and they can appear across all ranges of abilities and with varying severity or significance. And I just pause there because, you know, dyslexic people have a very high IQ and they are very, very bright. They just learn in a different way. You've got Jamie Oliver, Richard Branson. I mean, there's loads, Einstein, loads and loads of famous dyslexic people and neurodiverse people, aren't there?
And those people believe that dyslexia was linked to IQ, but it is not. They are completely different. So it's not because if you have dyslexia, you cannot.
Yes.
We don't know. We just need to find out how you can.
Yes, and they learn in a different way. These conditions are lifelong conditions and they're often hidden, sometimes by compensatory strategies. And we spoke earlier about masking and how you might try to fit in with something or a situation. But if you're neurodiverse, it might be difficult. And so you might end up masking in order to fit in with the people around you or the situation.
And it's important when we talk about lifelong, if you go for the medical model, it kind of means in every single situation, me who's autistic and ADHD will struggle with everything. Yeah. No. I will struggle in certain situations. So we go for that more social model. So though it is a lifelong condition, yes, if you're in the worst environments to be in, you will always, always, always struggle. If you're in great environments for you, then you will not be struggling. But it's not something which will go away. Generally what happens is you find how to make that environment better for you. You find ways to live your life that works for you. So you can kind of reduce the impact, but it's not going to go away. And when you suddenly get put back in one of those situations you can't cope with, it's going to be there full force.
Yes, and it's finding strategies to help you cope in those situations, I think.
But it's that social model is all about the environment you're in. So it's important to think about that. When you're in environments which don't work for you, you're going to struggle. When you're in environments which do work for you, you're going to do really well.
Yeah, and if you end up with a job, if you're neurodiverse, and there's a lot of neurodiverse scientists, a lot of people on the autistic spectrum, I would say, that are physicists, chemists, they like things in a certain way, very bright people. That's fine, each their own, and they're very, very successful. You might find dyslexic people who are absolutely brilliant, Richard Branson, they're good at thinking out the box, seeing the big picture, and understanding the information in a completely different way. And when you're working in a company, to have neurodiverse people is really useful in your workforce.
It is definitely.
So with those specific learning difficulties, you might have input. So that input is coming into you. It might be visual information, you might have visual perception and auditory perception. And that, sometimes people may speak to you and you don't understand what they're saying, because of the language. It's very difficult to be able to understand and actually process that information. You might have with integration, sequencing. I know dyslexic students find difficulty sequencing different processes, so breaking that down in a different way, organising things. You find particularly dyslexic people are quite disorganised, and they have to be helped in order to organise their day. I know sometimes people like visual timetables, for example. Autistic people like visual timetables. Abstracting that information is hard for them. And with memory, they might be good at short-term memory, but not so good at long-term memory, or the other way around, and actually helping them with strategies for that. And then the output, motor and oral. And you were saying earlier, Dale, that, people just might mouth off something in class, it's difficult for them to concentrate on what they're saying orally, might upset people. They might just say the first thing that comes into their head.
They do. And that's the thing, is there's a lot with those bits that people can have those differences. It's small, it's slight, but they can exist. And when we think of the input and output, is in schools, there is a traditional way of delivering information, and there is a traditional way of outputting that information. But they are not the only options.
Yes. And as I'm not sure if I said before, Dale, but you taught me how to use this microphone earlier. But Dale, I went to the Ursuline Convent High School in Brentwood, and I was taught by nuns.
Did anyone else jump?
That was an experience. Oh my goodness. It was board and chalk. Sister Dominic, God rest her soul, used to take the register. By the time she got to Janie Williams, she was asleep on the table. I thought she was about 150, we all thought she was really, really old. But yeah, she looked very tired. I think she was very old. And so the way they taught was just dictating at you. And that was hard. Or they wrote with the chalk on the slate. We had slate boards. That's what it was like when I went to school. I know I'm not 100, but it was like that. I think they've probably changed them by now. And so that input and output was completely different to what I had at primary school, which was very hands-on, very multisensory. And so when I teach now, I go back to my primary school, that the whole, I don't actually visit there, but I go back to the ideas of the ways I was taught at the PNEU school many, many years ago, because I think that works well.
It does. Generally, that's the thing. There are those who can just read information and get it, but most people don't. It's got to be done differently. It's got to get that engagement up. I think especially with children, where they're not learning because they want to, they're learning because they're told to.
Yeah.
When you grow into your adultness and you have a passion or an interest, you will learn because you want to learn.
Mm-hmm.
But children they have that curriculum they have to go through, and there might be things that interest them and things that don't, but they've got to be interested to pass the exam. But how can you get that engagement?
Yeah, teaching in different ways. And you have to be aware of those neurodiverse students in your class. They might have weaknesses and difficulties such as processing speed. You're talking to them in class and they're just not getting it because actually the lesson before they didn't understand the language, and you're building on that language, and they're so away with the fairies. They just really don't know what you're talking about. They might have short-term memory difficulties. They might have difficulty sequencing those processes, visual perception and processing, auditory perception. They might have laterality difficulties. They might have a sort of left-handedness or a right-handedness about the way they learn. They might have difficulty with organisation or decoding written language. And by having that special needs assessment, that will be highlighted. So they'll be able to understand and have those strategies to help them in the future. My thoughts about this auditory processing and the auditory input is, when I was a child, Mum used to make us watch the BBC News. I hadn't a clue what they were going on about. And then when we got home, sometimes we watched John Craven's Newsround. It was far easier to understand because of the language. And they had lots of pictures in there. And John Craven seemed quite a nice chap too.
But that's the thing, there is a whole Fleischmann reading scale or something. And you can put any block of text in and it will tell you kind of the reading age. And I think that the BBC aim for kind of, I think it's towards the top of primary, I can't quite remember, but the reason they do it is to make it accessible and easy to read for everyone. There's no point in writing in a really complicated way to show off how well you can write if that person reading it cannot access it. You've got to write it at their level.
You have. And if that person can't access it, then break the words down into different syllables. Tell them where the words come from and they'll remember it better. Give them a context to those words as well. Or, as I said before, make a link to that word so that they can remember it better. So those strengths, and sometimes they mention this word superpower. I don't know if you're into that sort of thing or not.
All I say is I think neurodiversity feels like the opposite of a superpower in school. I think these superpowers, if you have them, they're all different. These are things that shine when you find out who you are, you're comfortable with who you are, and in an environment that supports you. Yeah.
So those strengths could be the ability to find unique solutions to those difficult problems. You might have a group of teachers thrashing out some ideas about how to deal with students in class, and you're just sitting there listening, you think, oh, well, you could do this. They might be adventurous, courageous, thinks outside the box. They might be able to derive patterns where others can't see the patterns, they just see chaos. They might be able to talk about many different topics at one time. And I think, Dale, that's what we do. We just segue here, there and everywhere. That happens in life, doesn't it? There's constant evolution, constant learning, trying to make it better the next time. Good in a crisis, they can organise, first aid or something like that. Endless desire to try new ideas, tasks and projects. They are quite empathetic, actually, and intuitive. They're a continual source of new ideas, methods and strategies. My son's dyslexic, and if I'm thinking about an idea, I'll sort of talk it through with him and he'll come out with something completely different or improve it. It'll be even better than when I started. Ability to see many, if not all, sides of the situation. I know sometimes some types of people can only see one side of the story.
That point there is a really interesting fact, is when you're in that discussion with someone and you know they're wrong or you believe they're wrong, is flipping around and going, well, why are they believing it? And if you think about where they're believing it, it helps you then to maybe you might have looked at it a certain way and not realised And so it's really helps you. Also, it means that you can then use that to then kind of meet them in the middle.
Yeah.
Because when you have two opposing views, if you can appreciate that person's point of view and then kind of talk about it in their way, you'll have a shared understanding.
Yeah.
So yeah, that viewpoints is really powerful.
And I know with autistic people, sometimes they find it difficult to see the other side.
Yeah.
Some autistic people, I'm not saying all.
But no, that's the sort of thing
Autistic people that I've met, no, we're doing it that way.
And there's a whole bit around the empathy. Some people say autistic, but they do not have empathy.
They do.
But some don't.
Yeah.
Some have buckets.
Yeah.
Some have it in a different way. It's not autistic people aren't. They're
all different.
They're all different.
Yeah. As every person's different. They might be resourceful, and particularly dyslexic people, they're quite entrepreneurial, thinking about out-the-box ideas, really good solutions. So this autistic or autism spectrum condition, difficulty with social communication, sometimes, I'm not saying all the time, social imagination, social interaction, sensory sensitivity and processing, could be the lights are too bright, the noise in the room's too loud. There's a horrible smell in the steam room this morning at the village hotel. It's cherries. I don't like cherries. So why someone put cherries in there? I don't mind a bit of the old tea tree oil because I know it's good for your lungs. But there's someone that keeps dropping in cherry scented something in there in the morning. So I'm not sure who it is.
I don't think they can hear us, so it's all right.
Oh, okay. Yes. Yes, that's when I thought about the smells. Okay, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, we've got a developmental disorder, pervasive, affecting more than one setting. It's not just at home, it might happen in class. Enduring difficulties beyond childhood. It's neurological condition, it's also genetic. So what you see is, the parents might have ADHD, then the children might have ADHD. Mum goes to this scoff club on a Friday and there's a lady with 4 children and the grandmother's got ADHD and the grandchildren have got ADHD and they run round in the village hall, round and round in circles because they need to run. And so they just let them run around and, get out of their system. And when they have to sit down and eat their lunch, they eat their lunch. So that's good. Just seeing, not necessarily fitting in with everybody, but having those strategies to be able to release that excess energy and express themselves.
It's important. That's the sort of thing. You can't say they can't do that. It's like they need to. But if you kind of get that energy out of the way before lunch, they can sit and eat lunch.
That's right.
If you then don't let them run around, then lunch starts turning into a bit of a nightmare.
Yes, a bun fight, in fact. Yes.
Yes.
Throwing the bun. Yes. Yeah. And then they also have to have quiet time somewhere to decompress and sit there quietly as well. Then we've got dyslexia, neurological, reading and writing comprehension difficulties they may have, processing visual and auditory, and that visual, it might be information from a book. I've spent literally days up in Blackwell's in Oxford finding the right textbooks for my son with good words, good pictures, nicely colour-coded. And the auditory thing, I really think the easiest example is John Craven's Newsround there, or BBC News. Memory and sequencing. And if we are using memory, linking it to something they're familiar with, like rugby, and sequencing, different colour post-it notes, talking it, walking it, whatever works for them. And organisation, they find organisation quite difficult. I know when my son was at primary school, they had to do music, rugby, cricket, football, and we'd get to school and he's forgotten his trumpet. I'd have to go back and get it. There were so many things, so many different types of boots and shoes, indoor, outdoor shoes. How do you remember it?
I find it...
it's really hard.
I didn't have this when my friends had this when we were young. They had like A weeks and B weeks. And I think lots of secondary schools have A weeks and B weeks.
They do.
Which makes it really hard because I can't go, I have to remember this for Monday. So I have to remember this for every other Monday, which I just sit there going, that really hurts my head. I would really wish my Monday was the same. My Tuesday, I got into routine. Nope, it's always different. I mean, that doesn't happen in work. You generally, you have your calendar, but generally your work is quite weekly based.
Yes.
You'll have a marketing meeting on the Monday, and so whatever it is, your week is consistent. So having A/B weeks and moaning at children not being organised, it's kind of like A/B weeks is part of the problem.
Yeah, I've been in schools where you're trying to organise a visit to that school for moderation, and the teacher's going, oh, just wait a minute, I need to know if it's week 1 or 2.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, it's quite tricky. Then we've got the one we spoke about earlier today, oppositional defiant disorder, ODD. And I spoke about a particular girl there. I called her Olivia Awkward. And she was awkward. Yeah, so they might lose temper. Arguing with adults, would you like to do that? Question, no. Do you want to stand up? No. Do you want to sit down? No. Do you want to come to lesson early? No, I've got special permission. I go, well, I didn't give you permission. Well, I have. Oh, okay. Then you might ask the parent, oh, can she come to the lesson 10 minutes later? You're lucky she even turns up. So, that's really hard when you get someone with ODD. They might actively defy or refuse to comply with adults' requests, as I just said, deliberately annoys people. Well, that's certainly every lesson. I will come in 10 minutes late. They might blame others for their mistakes. They might be touchy, or we'll have a bit of that, touchy or easily annoyed by others. If they can be quite difficult, they can be spiteful and vindictive and angry and resentful. So you don't know who's coming in that door, do you?
I think like with ODD, I'm guessing it's kind of like that PDA thing where it's kind of, with PDA, there is no hierarchy.
Mm-hmm.
So your opinion, Susie, is just as valid as my opinion, even though you're the teacher and I'm the student. No, that doesn't, so sometimes when you're sitting there saying, well, that's from our point of view, you wouldn't be doing any of that and it's spitefulness, but actually their point of view is, well, they said that, so I can say this back because we're equal.
Yes.
And it's really kind of interesting if you saw the world that way, how you would behave differently. The bus driver can't tell me what to do when I get on his bus. No, it's his bus and you've got to pay.
Yes.
That's the way the world works.
Yes.
But we're equal. Yeah, so it's a really fascinating.
It is, working with them. I haven't had too many like that.
No, I haven't. I've just learned through the podcast. I'm learning various different people what it's like. It's not fun would be my understatement.
Yes, quite tricky, really. So teaching those neurodiverse students, you might need to know about that individual student. They could be autistic. It could be Harry Headphones or Lara Lark, who always turns up early. You might be hearing impaired, such as Audio Andy. Might be a selective mute, such as Quiet Quincy, or sight loss, such as Sonia Squint or Violet Vision. They might be physically disabled, such as Rowena Rower or dyslexic Entrepreneur Eddie. They might have ADHD, footballer Fred, who likes to come in the room and kick around the footballs or blow up my balloons. ODD, Olivia Awkward. You might have a family carer, which is caring Claire, or they might be in the forces, might be area army, who is affected by a parent's going away. And what you're doing is you're looking at that student iceberg. You want them to be well organised, getting good grades, doing their homework, enjoying their time with the family and friends, and being really good at their other talents. But underneath that iceberg, there's lots of other things to consider, such as, have they got enough money, finance to eat? Only about 25% of my students have eaten breakfast by the time they get into the classroom. They might have mental health issues. They might be a carer. They might be worrying about something. They might be worrying about school. They might have done lots of musical practice the night before and be really, really exhausted. Or that's what happened to my son. He had a concert every night of the week one week. He was absolutely shattered. But we want these students to focus, have good attitude, sacrifice things in order to do well, keeping fit, have good family relationships, good relationships with their peers. But they might have barriers to learning, and they've got barriers to learning who haven't been diagnosed with special needs. They might be magnified They might have had negative memories about something that's happened in the past because they are neurodiverse but haven't been diagnosed. They might have low self-esteem. They might have difficulty coping in class. They might feel a failure. And the stigma of having that condition might make them feel really awful. And they find great difficulty working in groups.
The groups one is always fun. No, I don't think anyone at school likes working in a group. So you're either the one who does all the work, or you're the one who, but it's just, they're all various reasons, or you're who's not listened to.
Yes.
Or the one who wants to be the person in charge of the pen, but is never allowed to be in charge of the pen. And all these different things. I don't think anyone but part of the reason is no one's actually kind of listening and working as a group. They're trying to work individually. But I think that's part of the reason you have to work as a group, to learn how to fail and succeed as a group.
And you can, if they work well, you can learn a lot from one another.
Yeah.
Yeah, students can help one another and extract ideas and build on those ideas. So it can be a good thing. But if you're neurodiverse, you might find difficulty in groups because you don't like talking to people.
No. My daughter at college, at your college, they do group work. And my daughter is kind of socially awkward. She sits there and realises that actually she is the least socially awkward out of the group of 4. So although she hates having to stand there and talk, she's realised that actually I'm the only one out of the 4 of us who can.
Yes. So you delegate that person to talk.
But it also means she's really aware of them and they work well, but she's kind of got to be the spokesperson and organiser, and they'll get it done. But it's just really interesting that she kind of reflected and went, although I'm socially awkward and I hate it, I'm not the one who's the most socially awkward. They all really struggle, so I best, which kind of helped her more.
That's good. And think about those students. We think about Maslow. Those physiological needs have to be met: shelter, food, warmth, etc. They have to feel safe. And many students in class, they don't want to finish early because they feel safe in there. They feel professional love and belonging, good self-esteem, and they want to reach that self-actualization. So that special needs student vision, every student wants to succeed in life. They want to do well in their exams. And so as teachers, we want to prepare them to be able to pass those exams, starting with a specification, using a textbook that they can use. And I said earlier that I spent a lot of time in Blackwell's finding the right book for my son to use, make notes, mind maps, exam questions, may form a study group, and then finally prepare for that exam. So now, Dale, we're going to discuss the advantages of getting that SpLD assessment. So when a SENCO or educational psychologist is going to do that assessment, they can provide a profile of strengths and weaknesses which can be used to further guide the development of the child in school and support them in the future.
And there are so many advantages. The thing is, there was an article shared on social media on this week that I saw, it was a couple of weeks ago, some academics saying there is no benefit to getting a dyslexia assessment. And what he actually meant is there wasn't the support or funding available in schools. So whether you got one or not, nothing was going to change. But that's done very much from the professional's point of view, not from the young person's point of view. So when we have all these strengths and weaknesses and all this lot, it's about getting them to that goal. But there is a whole other journey that young person is on, which is even more important than whether or not they get that GCSEs. It's actually that young person understanding themselves and finally finding out the reason they can't is not because they're stupid, not because they can't or anything. It's kind of due to their need, due to their neurodiverse condition, they are going to struggle in that area. And that's just the way it is.
And some parents may not be able to pay for it. So, Theopophetis, he's given a load of money to the Helen Arkell Centre so that children can have an assessment if they can't afford to pay for it. And if I give a talk for the Helen Arkell Centre, quite often I will not charge a fee. I'll do it for free. And the money they would have made by me talking there, they then use to give the money towards paying for an assessment for a child.
But it really can transform that young person's life. I got diagnosed age 43.
Wow.
And with autism and ADHD, apparently it was really obvious. It kind of was. But only when I found I could have both. But it was, the first thing I think was it wasn't my fault. And I also looked back throughout my entire life and I look at everything with a different view. So how I remembered it, I now revisit and look at it differently. And I can see lots of things I now see differently. I'm not upset with teachers did the best and things like that. But there are things that I've gone, oh, that's different. That's not quite how it was, or things like that. So it's really interesting. But without a doubt, my confidence throughout my life has been lower. My self-esteem, everything about all those things you mentioned are lower because it was my fault.
But you've come out the other side now. And you know more about yourself.
And that's
it's
the thing.
Been explained to you.
There is that bit about the education side, but that bit about knowing yourself is much more important.
Knowing who you are and celebrating who you are.
Yes.
Is important. Well, once you've had that assessment, you might arrange for further assessments at the school. You might have an access arrangement assessment to see if you need extra time. Quite often, students may have 25% extra time if they satisfy those particular criteria. You might get an input from an educational psychologist or another specialist, such as an occupational speech therapist. And you might have recommendations and interventions for life. So when my son had his dyslexia assessment, she recommended that he used a laptop computer because the teachers couldn't read his writing. It looked like a spider had crawled across the page. And so it was the English teacher that said, oh my goodness, I just can't read his writing. Please get him to use a laptop computer. So the assessor recommended him to use a laptop computer from about the age of 9, actually. And ever since, that he's really quick at using a computer. And it might have a huge impact boosting that person's confidence, knowing that they have autism, ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, because that will affect your future careers. And I know that EY and MI5 employ neurodiverse individuals and they celebrate that, The Made by Dyslexia, Lady Kate Griggs sort of does a lot of work with neurodiverse employees and has written a lot of information about that. It's worth looking that up. It's really quite interesting. And finally, dyslexia and autism are hereditary. And so you can be in it together. So when you were diagnosed with autism and ADHD, that was around the time your daughter was?
My daughter was on the pathway. We were part of that 3-year waiting list. And I basically took the decision to kind of leapfrog her. We went private so I could get my diagnosis before her. She knew it was all my fault.
Yes.
But it meant when she got her diagnosis, and we use the phrase, we're together.
Yes, you're in it together.
And she'll sit there and go, that's your fault. But in a loving way, not in a horrible way. It is kind of, she knows she gets things from me. But she's also now she understands herself better. She understands autism. She understands me. We look at things. We talk about things. She's also very aware of the benefits she's got from it. There are things she really struggles with, but there are benefits she's got. And she knows that what she struggles with will disappear as she can choose that environment more. But those strengths will be there forever.
And so you can have support and interventions. And if you have an early identification assessment, it's going to help you in school, isn't it?
And what I will say with that is the earlier, I think I'm going to say high functioning, low functioning.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say the earlier you are assessed and diagnosed, the more you are impacted.
Yes.
So I think there are lots of adults who get through to being full-on functional adults who then get a diagnosis. Yes, I have autism and ADHD, and I have low self-esteem, but there are those who are much more impacted in the way they access the world, where it's more noticeable, which is why they get those assessments earlier and they're identified earlier and they're supported earlier. But the earlier, even if you're just thinking there's something, the earlier that identification happens, the earlier the assessment, the better.
Yes.
They may not need it academically, but that social and emotional side, really, really, they need it.
Yeah. And from that assessment, you might have an individualized education plan. And in that education plan, I know for my son, it stated that, he ought to use a laptop computer, do mind mapping, various different methods for him to use in order to help him in the future. And that, it costs a lot of money. We did it privately, but set him up for life. It was really useful. Using multisensory techniques, you might have specific assistive technology that you use, voice-activated software screen readers. You might need small group or one-to-one instruction. You might need positive behaviour support, peer support, teacher, parent, carer, tutor and specialist support, teacher involvement. Teachers need continuous professional development, access arrangements, psychologically informed classrooms.
And what I would say on some of these areas is kind of what I'm kind of looking at and thinking about is certain skills, the socialness, the friendships, the relationships, getting on, all those sorts of things, kind of most children will pick up. I always say it's very through osmosis.
Yeah.
Just by being there, they pick it up. They know.
Yeah.
Whereas I would say I say neurodiverse generally, or most, whatever you want to phrase it, it needs to be taught explicitly.
Yeah.
And Joanna Grace talks about how she learned to go clubbing. So someone took her and she went a number of times over a period to learn the rules, to learn it. So she literally went clubbing and she just stood there watching and learning. And after, I think it was 3 months, Joanna Grace went clubbing.
He could be learning how to go into a pub and buy a drink.
So when we're looking at some of these social things, it's not, they can't, or no one's taught them. No one's taught them how to play Fizzbuzz or something.
Yes,
no one's actually gone in and taught them how to play a game. So they're going, they either disruptive or they avoid the situation, but it's that sort of thing is, they might even say they don't know, but it's just that explicitness of, have anyone actually kind of gone through, have you modeled, kind of focusing on those bits to help them learn. And that's what I think some of those all those supports are, is where it's not being picked up, it's spending time looking at those skills. So it's helped them. I know personally that I learned most of my communication skills age 16 upwards.
Really?
Not when I was at school. It's when I got into the real world work and I had to have conversations. I actually had to learn how to have conversations. I was a really awkward, quiet child. I also spoke too fast, which I sometimes do when I do the script parts. But I learnt.
Yeah.
Almost, as I say, explicitly learnt, this is how you have a conversation. This is how you talk to someone. It wasn't just through me, just naturally. It was a learnt thing.
I remember when we were teacher training, the chap in charge of the teacher training program said, when you go for an interview, don't talk for more than 3 minutes, because if you talk for more than 3 minutes, you've said too much and you're boring. Be careful not hogging the conversation.
Yes. Generally, go for a 50-50 split.
But
that applies to lots of things, even emails. Someone sends you a one-liner email, generally reply one-liner, unless they literally say, can you explain this? But yeah, the balance in the communication is something I'm very aware of.
Ah. So, yeah, we've got lots and lots of support and interventions. We've got as we said before, the individualized education plan. And it's good to have that, but sometimes it's not passed through to the teacher. It might be out of date. You've got your multisensory techniques, actually doing it in a way that works for that student, using those multiple senses, sight, sound, touch, smell, and taste, reinforcing that learning, making it sticky. They might be more engaged. It's beneficial with students with learning disabilities, particularly dyslexia, that assistive technology, speech to text. When we were in lockdown, the students started falling behind with the information they needed to type up. And I taught them how to do voice typing in Google, using Google Docs, using Dictate or Read Aloud in Microsoft as well. And they can type up, a whole page in 5 minutes of text. If you've got the text, they've just got to read it off. You might use a scanning pen if you're having difficulty reading that exam paper. 2 of my students didn't attempt a question on the cirrhosis of the liver because they couldn't read cirrhosis, and they didn't attempt a question on the esophagus because they couldn't read that word either. But if they had a scanning pen, they could have read it and they would have known what was on the paper. So it's having access to that assistive technology, actually showcasing it so that the students that need it can use it and they have the confidence to use it.
And with that assistive technology, it shouldn't be in a certain lesson or a certain time or when it's asked for. It should be ordinarily available to them so they learn to rely on it and learn to use it properly.
Yeah, and once they can use it properly, they're really quick. They can get the work typed up much, much quicker. They can type it up on the bus, wherever. This smaller group and one-to-one instruction, it's really useful because you can personalise that attention and you're tailoring those instructions with that student's unique needs. As I spoke before about the girl who's dyslexic, and I found out that she needed a green background, and we did that and it changed her world. And sometimes it's when it's on a one-to-one, that's when you find out. We might have that positive behaviour support, and it can be that it's based on, it has to be based on respect, mutual respect and understanding and reinforcing the positive behaviours. It needs to be inclusive and supportive. And it's very effective to respond to those challenging behaviours using that proactive and reactive strategies. Okay. Proactive is different to reactive. Proactive is what the student needs, on a daily basis to make sure that, they're behaving in class. Whereas reactive might be when you have to do something to make sure they're safe and the others are safe to, and prevent them being harmed or them harming someone else. I read a lot about this with challenging behaviour when I moderate and the traffic lighting system when working with people with challenging behaviour. So having positive behaviour support, everybody singing from the same hymn sheet, everybody using that same process. And talking about the student, we have a tutor that knows all about that student at college. And so there might be a particular intervention that's used that they can share with the other teachers that may help in the classroom setting.
Definitely. And the zones of regulation, the traffic light system is using that well. And there is, if you listen to one of our podcasts about it, there is no research based on the impact of it with students with special educational needs and disability, generally because the criteria for the research, it just hasn't happened yet.
Yeah.
So you can't say if it does work or doesn't work. To me, it's the amount of time spent on putting that support in and looking at the emotions and helping them understand their own emotions and how to transition from a red to an orange and orange. It's kind of those sorts of things because emotions happen.
Yes.
but it's kind of the choices we make in those situations, which is that proactive part, rather than when something's happened and then dealing with the aftermath of it all. Much better for everyone to put that extra work in before and helping that person manage their own emotions, be aware of their own emotions more.
And stop that chair being thrown across the room.
Yes.
Which doesn't really happen in college, but I know it happens in schools. It's also really important to have teacher, parent, carer and specialist teacher involvement. So we're all integrated together for that student success and work closely with the educators to understand those child's needs and how they can be supported with learning at home. And that teacher CPD, we might have that assessment, but those teachers need to have that continual professional development so they keep up to date with the latest research. We've got BDA free webinars, NASON, they've got a website with examples on there, the Tez Sen Show, and also Sendcast podcasts.
Who knew?
There we go. So that well-informed teacher can make a significant difference in that students' learning and their journey. Knowledge is power.
Without a doubt. And one of the things on our Sendcast sessions, which is our video CPD, kind of the year 2024, 2025 is kind of the year going back to basics.
Yeah.
So supporting autism in the classroom, supporting dyslexia in the classroom. So actually really trying to provide CPD for schools that they can access when they want. Because that's the thing is, when do I have the time?
Yeah.
When can we afford to get someone in? And it's those sorts of things. So that's the whole point of these sessions is they're easy to access when it suits you. You get the slide packs, you get to rewatch it as much as you want, but it's affordable.
Good. On demand. If they've had that assessment, they'll get exam access arrangements. It's not just the exam access arrangement, 25% extra time, a room on their own, a scribe, a reader, whatever. They need to know how to use that extra time.
Yes.
What are they going to use it for? How are they going to go through the paper and work out which question to do first?
In reality, knowledge is power, but actually exam strategy is more important than knowledge.
Yes, and I've spoken before about study skills and exam technique and how I see it as a crock and bush with all these different skills that you need, command, verb, marks and points, levels of response, point, example, explanation, relate, how you're going to answer the question, the types of question, fill in the gap, stick in the box, multiple choice, and how you're going to remember it, giving them all those skills. And I think that this is the work of Kat Goodacre, having those psychologically informed classrooms, understanding how that student ticks. There might be something at home that's going on and understand why they're so emotional that day. Why are they so upset? Actually seeing what's going on and keeping in contact with that tutor. Once you've got that assessment, you can go for their strengths and teach their strengths, such as dyslexic strengths. It might be visualization, communication, and imagination, or it could be they're really good at reasoning, connecting, and exploring. But we've got disadvantages of getting that special needs assessment.
We do. And we've got to start with stigma.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing. I think that fear of having a label.
Mm-hmm.
And generally, I would say that comes from parents. It comes from previous experiences people have had, or prior understanding of a term and what it really means.
Yes.
So there's a whole load of stigma. But yeah, I'm in a fortunate position that whatever label I have doesn't really matter because I'm in charge of a company. So I make my own adjustments and have done for years. So it's easy for me to say there isn't a downside of me having my... But that's not always the case. Some employers are amazing. Some aren't. Some might have some generic autism training, which isn't what you need and things like that. So for me, the advantage is all about me knowing me. The disadvantage can be others presumptions about me because of those labels.
Yeah. And you might feel guilty for having that condition, or you might feel rejection from other people around you in certain social situations. You might, we were talking earlier about you might have difficulty in a social situation where you're at a party, and you said to me, well, I go and help to clear up because then I don't have to really interact with people.
And there's also, for me, I'm going to use the term high functioning, although I don't like it, and I get the reason people, but often when a celebrity gets diagnosed, you can generally feel that there are those who are positive about it, but there are those who are negative about them because they aren't hugely impacted by their autism.
Yeah.
And they've lived that life, whereas someone else who's really impacted by their autism has really struggled with life thinks you're not really autistic if you can do all of those things. So then there's that within that kind of community, different things going on, and it can get really complicated.
Yeah, and I think when you do get a diagnosis, you've got that roller coaster of emotions. Find out, you feel sad, lonely, upset, low self-worth, low self-esteem for your child. How am I going to deal with this? For the person, and the expectations of, as a parent, what is my child entitled to? Will he get extra time? Will he not get extra time? He might struggle with a particular subject. The expectations that everybody at school does particular subject, Latin, French, Spanish, whatever, and they're struggling with it, because they've got dyslexia. They find difficulty reading particular words. English is difficult. So why teach them Latin, French, and Spanish? They might just get French, but then it is a struggle doing a foreign language if you're dyslexic.
Then it can help, especially I think if you do something where our language comes from like German, it can help with that morphology side if you're doing the sciences.
Particularly Latin, Latin's good for the sciences.
For everything, every one thing you say, you can literally flip it for the other.
You can.
That's what's, again, there is no one rule.
No, there isn't. Some parents don't want their child to have a diagnosis because they don't want to be treated differently.
I think they also believe it will limit them.
Yes.
So if they're dyslexic, they can't go to uni. Well, they can. There's amazing support at uni. We won't be able to get the job they want. They probably can. But it's that kind of belief and that lack of knowledge of what something really means.
They might not be committed to accepting that their child requires additional help and that everyday life will change.
And this is where you start walking on eggshells, because especially if you sit there and look at the fact it's hereditary.
Yeah.
And you might have a parent in denial.
Yes.
Because what their child's struggling is what they struggled with.
Yes.
And they haven't linked the dots.
Yes.
Which means not only is that child being diagnosed, but the parent by proxy is kind of being diagnosed, and they've got to deal with it. So when you're generally having that conversation, there's a lot of emotions for that parent. And also you basically, this is how they hear it. As somebody who's autistic is not, you're saying their child isn't perfect. You're saying there's something wrong with their child. Wrong's not the correct answer.
No,
it's not the correct word. But that's what they are hearing.
Yes, but they learn in a different way. They have superpowers.
But that only comes when you know more about it.
And do you know what, Dale? I brought this book with me today.
Oh, what is this book?
This book is Wonderful Wired Brains. And Dale has already been through there. And you've got a page about each different neurodiverse type of
It's all right. It literally starts with neurology, talks about loads of different things.
Having scripted questions about autism, the autistic experience. We've got about ADHD. I'm just going through the book now, about dyspraxia.
But it's actually, I'm looking at the book. When I look at the book,
clumsy. Dyslexia.
In reality, it's a good book that almost every child should read.
Or if you,
Because if they read it and they get to a page and they're going, oh, sounds a little bit like me. It might not be them, but it just might help them. But it's one of those bits where if you have some information, you can have a conversation about it.
yeah, you can. I mean, there's a bit here about synesthesia. It's a neurological condition that affects the senses. Usually when we see or hear something, one sense is triggered. With synesthesia, more than one sense is alerted. So you can taste a rainbow, for example.
I do that with Skittles.
Yes, I'm sure you do.
But it's that sort of thing is, in my head, I literally went, oh, it's really good. Is if you are neurodiverse, it's a good book to read. And I was like, everyone should read it because everyone learns about everyone's differences.
You do, yeah.
So it's a Dorling Kindersley book.
Yeah. There we go. I'm just going to shut it. There we go.
Susie likes her sound effects.
I do. Look, Dale, we've still got far too many Percy Pigs in here.
I'm just wondering if she does this when she's at home without the microphone.
Yeah, I don't know. And then, look, finally, the main disadvantage of school of family are time to do those individualised solutions and the cost. But for me, you need to empower, motivate and inspire those students, whatever their challenges in life. And written over my door is, if you believe, you can achieve.
But just going back to the disadvantage of the cost and the time, if you do preventative maintenance on your house,
yes,
it's going to be cheaper
yes,
than it going wrong. If you look at the weather forecast for where you're going on holiday, you will take the right clothes.
Yes.
If you learn all the laws and the rules of when you go to, I'm going to say the Middle East.
Yes.
They learn not to drink alcohol.
Yes.
Wearing not a lot of clothing while walking down the beach. And your holiday will be 2 weeks and not 5 years.
Yes. That's a good point, actually. Yeah.
So, although it might take more effort than me just turning up at that country to me to read the rules, or for me to go, right, what is the weather looking like in this country? I might presume, but for me to actually check and realize they're having a really bad weather or whatever it is, but that proactive, although it takes extra effort in the moment, it saves you time.
And it's worth it.
And we know with research that early identification and early intervention helps. And you might be thinking, yes, well, I don't have time. It will bite you in the butt. You will spend more time fighting, more time challenging than making adaptations, making changes earlier on. And Susie's multi-sensory teaching, that's trademarked, no, it's not, works for everyone. Yeah. It's not something you do if they can't. You do it for everyone. Everyone is engaged more. Everyone learns. Everyone who's seen Susie live, especially in Nottingham in February, is very entertaining. Susie Nyman's arena tour that happens. Everyone in that room, was a Senko. They were so engaged. Yes, when she gets out her balloons at the centre of Senko, everyone is engaged. Not going, this is stupid. They are listening and watching and paying attention.
Because it works.
So if the learning is meeting the needs of them, it's going to make everyone get more out of it. Because there are those with autism, with dyslexia, there are those without. There's also this group that no one knows about who are, but haven't been diagnosed yet.
That's right.
And you shouldn't have to wait for a diagnosis to make these changes. If it works, you should be doing it.
So I've got a little slide here. 780 million people in the world probably have dyslexia. It's a lot. So the summary of what we've talked about today, Dale. We've talked about what's neurodiversity, specific learning difficulties such as ASC, ADHD, ODD, dyslexia. We've talked about teaching neurodiverse students, the student iceberg, barriers to learning, self-esteem with Maslow, that special needs student vision where they want to do really well and those steps you have to take for them to go up that mountain of hope, if you like. The advantages of getting an assessment, the support and interventions, the strengths, the disadvantages of that SpLD assessment, and how you have to empower, motivate and inspire those students.
And if this is your first Susie Nyman podcast, we have gone into more like the student icebergs. We've done podcasts on that. We've done exams. So there's been lots of other podcasts we've done going into those topics in more detail, because they do warrant more than just a brief explanation of what the iceberg is.
We've done a whole one and I made an iceberg and chipped away at it in here, didn't I?
And in the middle there was a frozen Peppa Pig. Percy Pig.
Percy Pig, yeah. I think you're quite surprised about the frozen Percy Pig in there.
It was just the effort you went to.
Yes.
It wasn't like, I'll just, no. That took time to freeze half the water, then put the Percy Pig, then put the other half in. Effort went in and it was very much appreciated. As always, when Susie turns up and I have to go and help her with all the stuff out from the car.
Yeah. Well, that happened today with all my friends, the puppets.
So I would definitely say Susie is proactive rather than reactive, because she never sits there and goes, oh, I wish I'd bought, because it's here. And she hasn't even opened. There's a wheelie case. There's a Susie wheelie case, which does kill people on escalators.
Yes, it does.
That's a whole other story.
It is.
But she hasn't even opened that today.
No, I could have done.
But we had lots of fun, lots to play with.
Lots of other props here.
But for me, there's that whole thing of unconsciously incompetent, and there's consciously incompetent, consciously competent, and then consciously incompetent. Yes, incompetent. Yes. Unconsciously, whichever way around it is. But unconsciously incompetent is where we start. And we want to get to knowing. Mm-hmm. We want to get to that conscious zone. So you now know the support that's needed and how to do it. And that, to me, diagnosis, everything like that, is moving out from unconscious for everyone involved, not just that person, into that conscious.
Yes.
And with any of these diagnoses, the definition, the diagnosis of what dyslexia is, what autism is, what ADHD is a starting point. It's a general description of the term which you will loosely fit into. And with things like co-occurrence, so with me with my autism and ADHD.
Comorbidities,
you will touch on different things. You might not fit into that lovely autism box squarely.
No.
You might be like me and spread across a couple, and you go to the autism show and it's like you have all these people with the badges down there. I've got autism, I've got ADHD, I've got dyslexia and dyspraxia. It's like, how many can you collect? It's like Pokemon. But that's the thing is, one diagnosis might not actually be the final answer.
No.
Because and people have this experience when they kind of get a diagnosis for ADHD, and they then put all those strategies in place to get that person, was it Football Freddy?
Yes.
When he can now sit there and learn and actually involved in the classroom.
Yes.
You then realise he can't read. And it was that ADHD was hiding the dyslexia because he never actually sat down and got a chance to read.
No.
Then you to realise he can't read. Because
he was just too busy playing with a football.
And then you go, oh, so is that come out because of this? It's like, no, it's always there.
Yes.
But part of the reason he might have been just doing the more distracting is because he knew he couldn't read.
That's right.
So one answer is not always the answer. It might be just one answer on a path to getting another answer.
And my question was always, working with the students in curriculum support, they might be called naughty, for example. Why are they naughty? Why are they doing that? And it's normally the work's too hard, too easy. They don't understand. You need to teach them a different way. And when you do, it makes such a difference. So I had a boy that wasn't very good at science. He came up to me, but he knew the periodic table song. So we used to start the lesson with da 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 da, and he used to sing all the elements in order. And he was so proud of doing that. Now, I could have said to him, we're not doing that today, but the first 5 minutes we're singing the periodic table song, and then we will get on with the work, and then we'll go through the questions in chemistry. And I say, where does that element fit? Which group is it in? And he'd just sit there and go, da, 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 and he'd sing it all to me, and then he could work it out, and he felt confident with it, and he started to do better. Last I heard, he was doing science at a UTC in Didcot.
Nice. There is also, for those interested, there is a pie song as well.
Yes.
Through which my daughter learned. So she learned pie to like 20 or 30 places because the song gave you the rhythm of the numbers.
Yes.
And she can
3.142.
Yeah, that's as far as I can go.
Yeah.
I think 3.14176. I think. But she can just keep going. And I'm literally going, that's phenomenal. I personally don't see the point. But the periodic table, there is a lot more point to it because all this. Yeah. But that's, again, it's multi-sensory, giving it a rhythm, giving it a rote kind of, no. Yeah, but we all learn differently.
We do.
And as we get away from and that's the other thing, when you talked about the strength of dyslexia, you were talking about the big picture thinking, the imagination, the problem solving, the looking at things from different sides. In my head, I'm going, none of that fits in with the secondary school curriculum because it is just answering
that exam
in a very formulaic way. As you said, with the standard exam, there is a process.
There is.
And it's not about big box thinking. And that's where some of these students can really kind of sit there and believe I can't.
Mm-hmm.
As you get closer to the real world and work and universities and dissertations and projects, then that starts to become powerful. But you don't know that until you get a chance to use it. And Aaron Smith, who runs the now neurodiversity show, is a great example of someone who just can see something, builds it, and they will come type philosophy, and yet cannot read the name of my company. And does that stop him? No.
Because he has the sport around him.
Yes. Because he uses access to work and other things. So it doesn't stop you. It's just different.
Yeah.
I'll wrap it up there.
Thank you very much, Dale.
So thank you for coming on the podcast again.
It's a pleasure, Dale.
Never know what to expect. All I know is Susie's coming in.
Yes.
Whirlwind.
Excellent. And Percy Pig.
And there's only a few left, so I will have one in my hand ready to eat the moment I finish wrapping this up. Great. So, as always, we'll be putting links, and you give me some links to some books and stuff that you've written, so I'll be putting those in the show notes, as always, with Susie's contact details. And always, guess where you can find the show notes? Wherever you listen to the podcast and on the Sendcast website. If you haven't subscribed already, please click on that subscribe button wherever you listen, or if you go to the Sendcast website, you can subscribe to our newsletter and subscribe that way to keep up to date. You can follow us on various medias of socialness. On Twitter, we are at the Sendcast. On Facebook, the Sendcast. On Instagram, the Sendcast. And on TikTok, we're also, I think, Sendcast or the Sendcast. I need to check. And if you want to get in touch, let us know your thoughts, suggest topics, or anything else, please message us on social media or send an email to hello@thesendcast.com. And if you've enjoyed this podcast, why not look into Sendcast sessions? I mentioned them during the podcast, but it's our online CPD that you can purchase for your school. Each session is £10, but it's yours forever, so you can build up a library of CPD around SEND that everyone in your school can access at a time that suits them. It's on demand. We also run our free SEND briefings twice a year to help everyone keep up to date with the changes going on in the world of SEND. That is all freely accessible. You can access our older ones too. Head over to the Sendcast website to find out more about Sendcast sessions. And again, as always, you'll find a link to that in the show notes too. So thank you for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Sendcast. It is goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me and Percy Pig. Thank you very much, Dale.
Bye.
Bye.